This is Paul W. Papa, author of the Max Rossi Mysteries, a crime noir series set in 1950s Las Vegas, and I love listening to Anne, Tracy, and Kathy on the Dark and Stormy Book Club podcast. Let's listen to some more, shall we?
Hello, and welcome to Dark and Stormy Book Club. Today we have a visit with Bruce Robert Coffin. Enjoy.
I'm Ann Dart.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
We would like to welcome to the program Bruce Robert Coffin. He is one of our favorite authors. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to hear you say that. You guys are one of my favorite podcasts.
Well, Bruce, we've done this with a couple other people that have been in different fields. And I know our listeners would be interested in hearing, do the mystery genre get it right when it comes to police procedurals?
It's really a loaded question. I think it probably depends entirely on the writer and whether or not they either have past experience, like as I'm blessed to have had, or if they have a really good contact within the business. And it's funny because I read a lot of these, obviously. You read what the genre that you write in. I think that's one of the ways that we hopefully become better writers. But my wife and I also are ravenous when it comes to, we watch a lot of streaming television. We love the British and New Zealand and Wales and Ireland and all the different procedurals there are. We can't get enough of those. Some writers really do a nice job. I will say that one of my favorites from outside the States would be Anne Cleeves.
Oh, yes.
She's a machine. I mean, you think about all the different series that she has written, and now she's added another one to that. To my way of thinking, she really does a nice job with it. And I think the reason is, I think the thing that separates it out is, procedure is part of the deal. It has to be how it works as far as what the detectives actually do when they catch a case and try to solve the mystery and build enough of a case that you can charge the person or persons responsible for the murder. But I think one of the things that, and maybe this is just because a lot of writers are trying very hard to nail what that would be like without the experience. One of the things that seems to be missing sometimes for me is that they get so heavy into the actual procedure that they leave out the most important part, really, which is what it's like to do that from the detective's perspective, how they felt, the frustrations they feel, the stress, the politics, what it's like to have everybody that you're talking to lying to you, and really trying to chip through all of those things, all that noise to get to the truth. I think the writers that do a better job of inserting emotion and all those emotions that go along with trying to solve a murder in real life, I think they do a better job of encapsulating what it's like to be chasing after a murder.
I think that's why a lot of times they feature like a flawed person as the police person to give them a little dimension and show they're not perfect. And I think we as lay people can identify with that because it can't always be easy.
Trying to write this, and it's funny because when I started, I knew perfectly well what a mystery was, and I knew what the detective job was, having done it myself. I had no idea that there was a term called police procedural. I just assumed mysteries, encompassed everything that was a mystery book. And actually, I hate that name because doesn't it sound clinical? Doesn't it sound like something you'd have to sign up for, right? I'm signing up for Police Procedural 101 this semester, But I think when I first started, I heard a lot of people say, geez, whatever you do, don't write a police detective who's got an alcohol problem or has a marital problem or gets calls in the middle of the night to go out and solve a murder. My response to that was, well, then I'm not writing a police detective, I guess. That's everybody I knew. That was That is the job. It's funny, the trope of having the damaged detective. It's a trope, I guess, in literature, but I think like all tropes, it's based in reality. I didn't know too many people that were very good at being homicide detectives that didn't have those demons and didn't have that baggage that they carried around. Really, the better you were as a detective, the more dedicated you were to solving the crime, and that meant everything in your life goes on hold, the more likely you were to have a dysfunctional life outside of police work, even including a substance abuse problem. Because what ends up happening is, and my wife could attest to this, but she's a saint and she's still around, you're forced by the very nature of the job to put everything in your life in the back seat, whether it's your family, your spouse, your children, all those big events that nobody wants to miss. To do your job well, all of those things have to take a back seat, and you have to focus on what's right in front of you. And it's amazing how many times that phone rang during one of the holidays or just prior to a wedding or, a reunion or whatever it was. It seemed like that's when a murder would happen. I think that would be very tough to be the spouse. Well, my spouse would have been tough. I don't speak for her, but I can tell you that it's a tough way to be holding down the home front while your detective is off trying to solve somebody else's problems. Really, that's what it is. So
she ought to write a book from her perspective.
That's funny you say that, because as I'm sitting here saying that, I'm like, geez, there should be books written about that. Right? What
Yeah,
would it be like?
Really should.
She should
Right?
write a mystery from her perspective.
It's true. It's
as
true.
the wife of the detective.
Well,
That would
I'd be
very
afraid
good.
I'd recognize the victim in her book.
The one thing that we've heard over and over again, and I think it rings true, is that in TV and in books, a lot of times the detective is only working on one case. And that cannot possibly be true, or nothing would ever get done. No, it is true. And really, from a procedural aspect, generally there's an entire team behind the murder that you're seeing. A lot of secondary detectives that have different roles, but each case generally is assigned a primary detective and a secondary detective. And they are, jointly responsible for pretty much every aspect of the case. While they might not, maybe only one of them would go to the autopsy or something like that. But the idea is that both of them are very closely involved in every aspect of the case, so that if something happened to one of them, the other one could pick up the ball and still testify and still keep continuity with everything. Homicide detectives are no different than any other detective when it comes to a caseload. You don't get just one at a time. It doesn't work like that. And it's funny because, like they say, bad news comes in threes. We might go a couple of months without a murder, an active murder. So you're working cases that you already have, prepping for trial or working on a cold case or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden 2 would come in within the space of a couple of days or a week. Now everybody is just stretched right to the limit because all those other cases are still there. And especially if you were prepping for trial for one upcoming. But now you've added all the stress and 24-hour, shift work for what's happening currently.
in real life, what is the just average time from an arrest to the trial? How long a period of time?
Well, generally with a murder case, you can almost set your watch by this because, the law is set up that it's supposed to be a timely and fair trial and, a jury of your peers and all that kind of stuff. Timely for murder cases usually tends to be about a year because there's so many decisions that have to be made before the thing actually goes to trial. Once the charges have been filed, and in Maine, like I'll give you an example, every state or every jurisdiction has their own rules, but in Maine, it's not the district attorney that tries those cases. It's the state's attorney general's office. And so the murder itself also gets an assistant attorney general who will be assigned as the trial prosecutor, or maybe even 2 of them. I've seen them co-prosecuted as well. And they're assigned as well, just like the detective at the very beginning. One of the things we did when we caught these cases is generally you'll need a bunch of things like search warrants, and you want to bring in the prosecutors early in the process so that they're involved in those aspects. So I might have a detective over working on the probable cause statement to back up a search warrant, and we would generally involve the attorney general in that. So they might come into the station with us. They might do it by telephone, and then we could email them the document to have them go over it and decide, whether or not they wanted to add anything or if there were things they wanted to leave out, because all you're really doing at that point for that affidavit is trying to establish probable cause. So you're not looking to put the entire case in there and give it away where the media might pick up on it or something. But yeah, generally speaking, from the time the arrest actually happens, the charges are filed, there's so many court motions that will happen, and it can take a year, sometimes longer. But once the arrest is made, usually that clock starts ticking, and you don't want to go too far because then you run the risk of having it not being a speedy trial, and you don't want to give any ammunition to the defense in a case like that.
And they can say, let me go because you didn't. Yeah.
Right. Can you imagine? I don't know if that would ever happen, but can you imagine? It's kind of a
I'm
scary
sure
deal.
they try it.
Right. I'm sorry you took too long. We have to let you go. So
Yeah.
In books and in TV, what is something when you see it or read it makes you cringe when it comes to police work, when things that they portray?
Well, the two that really stick out to me, and one of them, actually, I can't probably understand either one of them if someone's actually done a little bit of homework, but the gun one is always bad. And I think that's just because of what visual media has done, what movies and television have done. If you think back to some of the shows you've watched, I guarantee you see a police officer pull their gun and charge it. Like if it's a semi-auto, they pull the slide back and put a round in. Now they're ready to go to a gun battle or with a shotgun. And as amped up as that sound of that slide for a shotgun makes you feel, we all get that pucker factor when you hear that noise. Everyone knows what that noise is, and it means danger. As cool as it sounds, every police officer that responds to something already has a gun ready to go. And there's a bunch of reasons that you wouldn't want to do what they do either. First of all, you're making noise, which is giving you away. In the case of a semi-auto, if the magazine, which is in the gun already, is full, there's not one already in the chamber, you're shorting yourself a round. Because in order to load that and pull the slide back and put a round in, a live round in the chamber, you've now got one less bullet in the magazine than it would actually hold. So I don't know any police officer that would go in not fully loaded. That's a big one for me, and it tells me that the people doing it don't understand firearms. The other thing is, and this is a killer for me, and I watch it all the time, the detective will talk to a witness and they'll show a picture, like either a single picture from a folder, or maybe they'll pull up a photo on their phone and they'll say, is this the person that you saw do whatever? Okay. Nothing like trying to push them in a certain direction, right? Yeah, we did photo lineups. I mean, that was exactly the point. I would try to create a photo array of 5 people and the one person I wanted you to identify that all look very similar. So you'd have 6 photos. We show them that, and we give them very specific instructions. They're only marked by number. There's no identifying things on them. They're all very similar in appearance, color and shade, and you wouldn't put something in there with a nose ring and then 3 people without a nose ring, that kind of thing. So you try to get people that are similar looking, and you ask them to tell you if they recognize anybody in the lineup. And if they do recognize them, where from. And that's it. And then you don't say, if they pick out the right one, you don't congratulate them. They don't get a cookie. They don't, none of that stuff. You've now filed away that they have identified that person. You get a statement from them saying that they recognize number 3 as the shooter. And now that all becomes evidence.
Yeah,
but
you don't sit with your finger on the picture.
Well, exactly. You don't put your finger on the picture. You don't put a marker underneath. This is the guy. We never show the one picture because it can taint, the whole case. That was one of the problems that we always used to have because we did photo lineups. If you had an overzealous administrator that wanted to put a photo out of somebody, maybe an old booking photo or something, if that got out to the media and get in the paper or on TV before we've had a chance to talk to all our witnesses, the first question the defense attorney is going to ask when they get on the stand is, did you recognize them from that night, or did you recognize them from the newspaper article that was in the paper the following day? See what I mean?
Exactly.
And then, if someone's being honest, they might not be able to tell you for sure, so those 2 things kill me. And I guess as I'm sitting here talking to you, there's one more that gets me too. We love these shows, but Michael Conley does it occasionally. Harry Bosch has been known to pick a lock or 2. But I've noticed that Midsomer Murders, some of those episodes, they'll do 3 burglaries in one episode so they get the evidence.
That's one of our pet peeves. These people that just, are constantly climbing in people's window.
Right. I said, I'll tell my wife, I'm like, geez, if it was that easy, I would never have retired. I'd still be doing this, So yeah, and that, I mean, obviously, probable cause. If you had probable cause, you don't need to break into anything. You can get a warrant. And the other problem is if you've actually done that. Let's say,
They'll
you know,
throw
let's
the
say
case
the
out.
police detective's being lazy and they don't want to take the time to get a warrant if they don't know what they're looking for is actually there. So let's say they're taking a peek just to make sure the evidence is there. Well, if it ever comes up, the question is going to be asked, did you go in before you got the search warrant? Well, you have two choices. You either have to lie on the stand, which is perjury, or you run the risk of your entire case being thrown out.
Yeah.
Because everything you get after that illegal search is fruit of the poisonous tree, and it can't be used as evidence. Yeah, they love to do that, and I guess it speeds the plots along, but in real life, detectives would not be doing that.
Well, I have to tell you that I read all my life, and until the OJ trial happened, and I actually got to see how police can affect an investigation, like when Mark Furman
Right.
totally botched that. I was fascinated with that. That trial probably would have went in a completely different. So,
Oh, of course. Yeah. You could never have a worse example of what you don't want as part of your murder case than him. I mean, I remember they were playing audio tapes of him going around. I think he was trying to get a book deal or something.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, that was.
he's throwing all this racist language around, and I guess his
No,
attempt
it
was
was
to,
just because I was selling a book.
right. And I'm like,
Right.
how is there any way that you can justify that? And then this guy really is the detective you want to put involved in a case like this? That's just nuts. So everything is about following the rules, trying to do the right thing, and know that when you get to court, if you haven't dotted your I's and crossed your T's, and there's a Mark Furman kicking around in your case someplace, any defense attorney worth their salt is going to have done their homework. And if you've got detectives in there with questionable character, you've already done half the job for the defense by putting them in the case. So just bad practice, bad police work.
We live north of Baltimore, and Baltimore in the last couple of years has been in the news quite a bit for bad cops.
Yep.
And the the gun task trace force or whatever it was called. And and then with Freddie Gray, and so
Yeah, we've had all kinds of good.
no, and those didn't involve guns at all, but it just really bad cops.
It is, and it's funny because it's I mean, nothing funny about it, but it's funny that it has taken over. It's funny. I know I go back and I look at Facebook, and so Facebook reminds me of my past. I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, but Facebook reminds me every time I posted something, if something was happening around the country, and I can go back and find examples of crazy things like this all the way back to 2012, 2011. Obviously, there's no justification for a bad police officer or a bad shooting or any of those types of things, or bad practice, depending on what it is that we're talking about. And every business has them, despite the amount of effort that law enforcement agencies go through to screen when they hire, and really continue throughout. There are still going to be bad apples. When I got hired, I had to pass the actual written tests, several of them. I had to pass a psychological, I had to pass a polygraph, physical test, and on and on and on. And then the entire time I was on my job, you're constantly under scrutiny for everything you do by internal affairs, by the legal system, by the media. We really work hard to scrub out any bad cops that might get through. Of course, that doesn't preclude officers that actually were good police officers, but turned bad for whatever reason. But I think by and large, the problem is that in the media, we only see the negative incidents. There's not an hour-long dedication to every good thing that happens throughout the country on a certain day. They'll only cover the bad thing. And if you think about the fact that there are 800,000 sworn police officers in this country alone, trying to keep 350 million people in check, we started listing off on our hands the things that we thought were questionable that the media covered. Really, when you think about it, there's very few. When you look at it in the grand scheme of things. Now, obviously, one is too many, but I don't think it's quite the way people portray.
Well, you know what they say, if it bleeds, it reads.
Well, exactly. That's exactly what it's about. It's funny because as a book writer, obviously sales are very important. I get that part of it. But what I write is fiction. I think the other problem is, and I am absolutely 100% behind you and the media and everyone else's efforts when it comes to trying to root out people that shouldn't be police officers or have done very questionable things. But I also know that from looking at some of these cases, not all of them were the way they were purported or reported to be. And once those mistakes are put out there and the damage is done to the reputation of law enforcement, I haven't seen too many people going back and revisiting those and apologizing for getting the details wrong, or that never happens. So it just keeps the legend going of the bad police officer. And it makes it harder for everyone else left behind to try and do their job. It just makes it tougher every time. So I still think largely it's a very small minority of the police officers that we keep encountering that do this kind of stuff, and probably much smaller than you see in many professions. But like I say, even one is too much, and there has to be something to deal with. The good news is I still believe in the judicial system. The gentleman responsible for what happened to George Floyd is right where he should be. And I think that just tells me that the system still works. It's unfortunate the amount of damage that was done. And it's obviously unfortunate that George Floyd himself is not here anymore because of a bad police officer. But justice was done. I mean, I think he got exactly what he deserved for what he did.
Well, Bruce, we thank you for that information.
It was fascinating, and we could talk to you about it all day.
Let's change gears here. Tell us about the new book.
I've got a bunch of things going on, but my Byron series is currently on hold. I have just signed a 4-book deal with Severn River Publishing. Actually, I've already started writing, but I am co-authoring a brand new thriller series with Lindy Walker. And I am having an absolute blast doing this. It's funny, I was a little worried entering into a project where I was actually going to be working with someone else, because generally speaking, the only crazy person I allow inside my head is me. So now there'll be 2 writers occupying each other's gray matter, but we're really having a good time with this, and I'm hoping the readers will go along for the ride. I think the working title of the first book right now is called The General's Gold. There's a little bit of everything. There's some good dialogue. There's some historical elements. There'll always be a treasure. And I think people will have a lot of fun with it. There's a bad guy around every tree.
When is that supposed to come out?
We are still playing with that. I think that's still a little bit loose because they want to do like a rapid fire release. So I think you may not see the first book until the spring of 24. But I think you'll be seeing all of the other books, other the first 4, will be rapid fire, like maybe every couple months there'll be a release.
That'll be good.
So once we get you hooked, we're going to reel you all the way in. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's funny, though. I'm enjoying the writing, and I think somebody was asking me about that at the C3 conference last weekend. And I said, I think one of the differences is that even though I love writing my John Byron series, and I still have a 5th book that I'm working on, it's weird. It's like what we just talked about with procedurals. There are certain things you kind of have to follow for rules. And even though I love writing the series, I feel somewhat as I'm sitting down to write these that I have the playing field that I've established in the other books. And that's where I have to play inside that field. I can't really stray outside of that. And with this series, I almost feel like as I'm writing it, I'm coloring outside the lines. I'm enjoying it. It's a lot of fun.
We'll look forward to it.
And definitely send us a copy when.
Oh, I will. We definitely will. That'll be cool.
So, yeah, maybe we could have you both on. That would be nice.
That would be good.
How is it writing with a partner? How do you do that?
We're splitting it up. I mean, we're learning as we go. She's done this before and I have not. So it's a learning experience for me, and it's a learning experience for her to have to work with me, I guess. So on this first book, she's doing the lion's share of the plotting and the synopsizing. I've started making suggestions as we're fleshing this out. Really what I'm trying to do early on is I've taken some of the early chapters and started writing them even before the synopsis was finished, because what I want to do is get a real good feel for who these characters are. We've both been writing series, and so we know our characters very well, but we have to get to know these characters. So we're spending quite a bit of time, and I'm finding photographs that look like the characters that we're writing. So we're both seeing the same thing, and I think that's making it easier. I tell people that Lindy's making up the recipe and I'm going to go in the kitchen and make a big mess. That's pretty much our plan here.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right? You can visualize that, can't you?
Yep.
Flour everywhere. It's just going to happen. So,
yeah.
But
well, it was such a pleasure getting to connect back with you. We loved seeing you at Malice.
I always look forward to that. I always look forward to seeing you guys.
It's the best. And we hopefully will see each other soon. Real quick, you said you had other things in the works.
Yes, I also have a standalone that I started writing. It's called, the working title is Inside Woman. It's a fast-paced thriller. There's a little more violence than some of my other books have had. And I tell people that when I was creating this character, when I came up with this idea, I'm not going to tell you too much, but I'm kind of channeling my inner Beth Dutton for your Yellowstone fans out there.
Okay.
She's my favorite character on that show. And every time I see her in a scene, I know something bad's going to happen. So, so I'm trying to channel that into my character. And she's a little crazy. She's a little, she's totally capable. And I never know what she's going to do next. So I think if that book ever sees the light of day, it'll be a fun read for people as well.
Okay, that does
Sounds like it.
All right, Bruce. Well, you enjoy the rest of what's left of this day. And,
Thank you so much.
And we'll talk to you soon.
It sounds good. Be well, all of you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Trivia. Last week's question was, author Patricia Highsmith once attended a cocktail party carrying a large purse. What was in it? A change of clothing. B, her manuscript. C, her cat. Or D, 100 snails and a head of lettuce. The answer is D. Patricia Highsmith bred about 300 snails in her garden at home in Suffolk, England. Highsmith once attended a London cocktail party with a gigantic handbag that contained a head of lettuce and 100 snails, which she said were her companions for the evening. This week's question is, which icon of the mystery genre began their career as a typist at a law firm? A, Patricia Cornwell. B, Earl Stanley Gardner. C, John Grisham. Or D, Lisa Scottoline. Tune in next week for the answer. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you listen next week. And remember,
Life would be boring without a little mystery. Bye.